Virgin Islanders were now in charge of their internal affairs. The new government was eager to transform the territory into a modern nation, and to do this, they reached out to foreign investors.
I think the government of the day, they had a lot of influence from the administrator of the day. And they were eager to get an investor.
The island's tourism potential caught the eyes of American and European businessmen. British developer Kenneth Bates, who made his fortune in South Africa buying and selling scrap metal, was among the prospective investors.
Kenneth Bates was like a modern-day Cecil Rhodes. And Cecil Rhodes, an Englishman at the age of 25, went to South Africa, and he went into the gold and diamond business, became quite wealthy. He went north to Rhodesia, to Zimbabwe, which he called Rhodesia. There he was able to give gifts to the chiefs there and got control of all the land, because he got a crown grant. I think that's the term that they use. And he even named Zimbabwe and Zambia, Rhodesia, after his last name. So he had North and South Rhodesia.
He visited the islands in 1965 and found an underdeveloped tourism sector. Bates bought Wickham's Key 1 from Norman Fowler for $700,000 US and leased the surrounding lagoon and Wickham's Key 2 from government. Fowler, a white businessman who owned the Tortola Times, the first newspaper in the territory, had bought Wickham's Key 1 from local Glennie Fonseca for $40,000 US. The new government had inherited a 199-year lease signed by Administrator M.S. Staveley with Bates Company. The plan was to develop the land into luxury facilities for tourists. It was Walter de Castro, a civil engineer with government, who told Noel about the contracts.
Mr. de Castro at the time were acting chief surveyor, or perhaps he was the chief surveyor, and a lot of the official documents to pass this act had to go through his office. And when he realized that this was, if you will, we can call it a sabotage, he got with Mr. Lloyd, and they talk about it.
What alarmed us most was when he said that the only black people, you have come to a black country, and you're going to say that only black people that will be allowed on Wickham's Key would be those who are maids. So it meant that we either all had to turn into maids, or we wouldn't be permitted to go on Wickham's Key.
But he knew what it was. And he would come and he would tell us about these different borders that they would be having. Which one would be coming from by the hospital area. The other one would be coming from Treasure Isle. Whichever way that you could have got to the key, that would have been closed off to us.
To sweeten the deal, Bates was also given control over 3/4 of Anegada, the only flat island stretching 15 square miles. That lease, too, was for 199 years.
It would not have been a pretty picture for the Anegadians, would have been a very productive and pretty picture for Mr. Kenneth Bates and his associates, because if I was to quote a figure, based upon what they say the population growth would have been, we would have well been up to perhaps 40,000 people, but not from Anegada or the British Virgin Islands. It would have been merely the business people who would have been coming in here for the leasing of the land, so to speak.
This was the catalyst for Noel's political activism. His life changed when he worded his first letter with the headline, Social Injustice. which was published on March 2nd, 1968 in the Tortola Times.
The milieu in the world at the time was a very revolutionary time. It was the black struggle time. People were, the African Americans and other black people in the world were trying to assert themselves to try and get out from under the colonialistic rule. And therefore, he thought that it was applicable to resist that sort of development here.
He was in what I term at that time a weird mindset. He was angry about it. He was angry and pretty upset that this would be allowed or that this was going through.
Because of that situation that developed and the fact that the white population was growing so fast and that their attitude was it had belonged to us, the British Virgin Islands, and we are coming back for it. That created a lot of uncertainty among the entire population. It was common for people to pass remarks saying, I have my machete or I have my gun, nobody is going to get my property. He had clause in the agreement stating that the company would have the right to cut off water and electricity from the village and the expanded part of the village, because he knew what he had in mind and he could see that there would be unrest. So that would have been like a weapon to subdue us by having control over water and electricity.
It was almost getting close to our apartheid system because the white people had more liberty to do it than what they wanted to do it. And we were just like hardly any work, hardly anything to do. And it was like that.
He was motivated by the Pan-African movement and independence struggle taking place across Africa and the Caribbean and the civil rights movement in the United States.
In the States, there was a lot of rioting, a lot of unrest. All over the world, black people were touched by the fact that Martin Luther King was assassinated. At this time, when we were pondering how to fight to get back what we have lost, the idea came to me to start the positive action movement. Let us have a march, make it jewel in remembrance of Martin Luther King, and to fight against our grievances, to renegotiate.
Noel Lloyd's public campaign began in earnest on April 6, 1968, with a one-man march around Road Town. 2 days after the assassination of civil rights activist Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., a man he greatly admired. It was the birth of the Positive Action Movement.
With Positive Action Movement, I didn't get a group of people and we discuss and form a movement. I took positive action and move. And as I move, people follow. Each fit in an area where they felt comfortable.
On April 8, a determined Noel stood before a large crowd on the recreation ground in Road Town and passionately made his case against the Bates Agreement. Much to the annoyance of Bates and his local and foreign business partners, the movement gained momentum across the territory.
He was very vocal about how he felt and what the dangers were of such a venture. And so he spoke at length about it.
He came around to several persons, of which I was one, and he said, we need to address this problem because this is something that will haunt us and our children, our children's children in the future. And I became very interested in it because being a young businesswoman myself, I didn't want to know that we were going to have something that would haunt us.
The supporting cast, which was the Tom and Tree Boys, what we referred to at that time, he would always come to us. Because like I said, he lived right at the foot of Jerusalem. So when he comes down, we would be down there waiting, or we would be by the market square waiting. But it was an enthusiastic time. It was the 60s. A lot of things were happening. There were many changes. The Martin Luther King was alive. The Malcolm X just got shot. I mean, these things were happening. The Caribbean was changing leaders at the time. So we were right.
We used to meet at that time at the old market, right by Midtown, where Midtown Guest House is now. That street go down there had a market, and we used to meet there. And what we discussed there, Mr. Lloyd used to tell us, he don't want it to be published all over. We got to keep it undercover.
On April 9, 1968, Noel led the historic march to Government House.
In 1968, at that time, I was pregnant with my first child, and because of his mood, I was frightened. I was frightened. I was frightened for my child. Being the mother first, you were protective of your family.
The 60s was a time and a period of time then where there were changes. So the younger generation were ready for changes. The older generation were more or less laid back, and they would take anything that the leaders had said at them.
Until we brought the information to the public, then they became very interested and very angry with the government to know that they could enter into such an agreement without bringing it to them for their input or opinion.
The mood of the territory was one of disgust. It was one of great sadness and loss. It was one of where we felt that our birthright and our future was going to be hampered by this agreement.
Most of the Enegadians, Mr. Potter and Mr. Smith and all the rest of them, who perhaps have been taken in at first with their investment that would have been taking place, because nothing wasn't actually happening here until they understood what it meant, and then they all throw their support behind Mr. Lloyd and Mr. De Castro and positive action movement.
Mr. Lloyd decided that we are going to have one more meeting and then we're going to hit the road. And he did just as he said. That meeting that he kept at the bandstand, he was well passionate. He was full of courage and feel that he had confidence in who was following him. And he decided that, okay, we're making progress.
So I led the march with the flag that we made up and did the Royal Air Force slow march.
That morning, when we hit the road, a lady come out by the name of Noel Harrigan, and she said, regardless if we got to take back our country from Kenneth Bates, or whatever we got to do, we are going to march this morning and we are going to take our country back. This lease must be revoked and Kenneth Bates must go. And that lady, the passion that she had, I believe encouraged a lot more ladies to follow that march.
The march went down in the name of Martin Luther King. That was the pretext. It wasn't nothing about going to take the key at the time. So I didn't have no, opposition about going down the street because it's in the name of Martin Luther King. So this is what happened when they got past the police station with the people that didn't want to be seen with Noel Lloyd. After they saw the magnitude of the rally, the amount of people that was going, they started getting on and they ran on.
We closed up all the businesses, local and foreign. It was like an August Monday celebration.